Good morning, flat-bellied fellow travelers and coffee chat people. Today I wanted to share an idea with you which, when I first had the idea of sharing it, I thought I'd probably lose a few people who haven't had interest in this sort of thing just because of perceived values or perceived ideas. And sure enough, I've had a few requests for unsubscribe as a result of putting out the idea. And the idea is Tantra. And anybody who's ever heard of Tantra, it's usually associated, especially in the Western world, having to do with something to do with sex or kinky sex or whatever, what have you, something like this. And it's much more than that. So anybody who thinks that I'm going down that road, you can rest assured that I'm actually not. That it just became a topic of interest because, well, we've never covered it, and anything that could be of value, why not have a look at it? That's my impression anyways. Tantra essentially, from the meaning of it originally, it means to stretch. It comes from the word tan, I believe. To tan leather, for example, comes from that word, or they're related because it's just stretching. It's an idea of stretching ourselves to more than we perceived ourselves to be, in other words. And tanning being of the everyday, the skin, or the substance of our being can even be stretched in a way or utilized in such a way that we can grow. And Tantra was basically, and probably still is, a technique-based belief system that came out of India hundreds of years ago, primarily India, but it wasn't necessarily a religious-based thing. There were adherents to Tantra in Buddhism and in Hinduism and perhaps others as well. But it basically was in some ways at odds with certain types of yoga practices which were very much divine oriented only. In other words, all of this camera, you looking at it and so on, was all an illusion. This is what some adherents to certain yoga practices, and that there was only the divine, everything else is a complete illusion. Whereas Tantra basically sees the divine in everything and as everything. So in other words, transcendence or change within ourselves can take place within the immanent. In other words, within the everyday. If I can think of something and see that plant over there, that is real to me. And Tantra says that's fine. Whereas certain practices would say, well, that's all an illusion over there. So many people have, improved their quality of life through this. And the reason sex appears so much is because in the Western world, primarily, when I say Western world, primarily the Christian, Judeo-Christian based Western world, there has been such a taboo built up around this. And yet, the nature of what we are as human beings, there is still that hankering for even the taboos. And because Tantra didn't skirt around any aspect of human life, it was practical ways in which we can live our lives, and it was built primarily for what was called the householder, the man and woman who went to work, raised their kids, etc. There was also instructions about the bedroom, I suppose. I haven't read them much of them, but this is one aspect of hundreds of aspects. There was also how to decorate your house and so on. But all it was about using the everyday nature of ourselves to learn about ourselves and to grow and to transcend us, essentially. And as some would say, to bring about the freedom from ignorance and the cycle of suffering, which is really what we want as human beings, isn't it? To bring about those solutions for what we perceive to be our challenges in life. If Tantra can help, or the ideas that we can glean from the old ancient teachings of Tantra, then why can't we look at it? And I want to share a little story with you, which many of you will have either read or heard before, because if you're a subscriber to the flatbellyfeeling.com, it's an early story that takes place in the e-course actually, and certainly part of it, a version of it, is in my book that's coming out very soon. But I'll share it with you right now, and I want to point out as I go along, as a commentary in a way, how this story relates to Tantra as I see it. And it's not a sex story, it's not that salacious, but I just thought I'd put that out there in case there's anybody a little bit nervous about that. It's a story about a lady named Margaret. I'm going to read most of it because I'm going to fill in the blanks here and there to point out as best I can how I think this relates to what we're talking about. So basically it's a story about recognizing the value of desire. And of course, Tantra would recognize the value of desire because Tantra recognizes everything that is our experience as real and perhaps of having some value. So Margaret took this advice in a way somehow. There's not much commentary on how this leads up to where Margaret is, but nevertheless she took the advice that she had received somehow, that desire has value. She took it to heart, and she ended up with results that she wanted, and not only that, a good story to tell. How it goes is basically, at a certain point in her life, Margaret developed a desire to shed some of the weight she had gained. And how many of us have experienced something similar, or if it wasn't weight to gain, it was to achieve something or what have you, certain relationship, we develop desires. It's just part of our nature. It's like we develop hunger for food. And in particular, though, she didn't just want to lose something. The question rose within her, okay, what do I want to gain? See, a lot of times we'll say, I want to lose something. What do we want to gain? Margaret wanted to achieve the flatter belly that she once had. Why? For the feelings associated with it. And this is the case with most of us, isn't it? So she's recognizing all of these things as real within her. Very tantric in nature, we might say. And with this desire and the recognition of all this, it was like a spark had gone off inside of her, which began a mental shift. And she began to paint a vision of herself. See, she not only just recognized the desire, and rather than shut it down, which is very non-tantric in a way, oh, that's all illusion, forget about it, she decided to indulge herself in it. And because of that, she developed visions. And visions were like a motion picture running through her mind of herself with that flatter belly. And as a result, she was able to create a very clear statement of what it is that she wanted, which said basically, melting it right down, I want that flatter belly, and I want to enjoy shopping for new, smaller clothes. That was hers. Might have nothing to do with you or I, what we want, but that was hers. So we can use this as a template in a way, or a recognition of what's going on, that Margaret sees these things as real for her. She wrote this statement on a 3x5 index card and carried it with her everywhere she went. She made it even more real, you see. Very tantric. Tantric is to bring out the real and enjoy the real. And through the real, in our experience, individual experience, we can grow. She read this first thing in the morning, before going to bed at night, whenever she had time throughout the day. She also further indulged herself by creating a 30-second visualization exercise, which she didn't just look at the statement. She allowed herself to percolate in it for a while and enjoy it, right? This 30-second visualization exercise wherein she saw herself with that new flatter belly. She saw people recognizing her with it, and how it felt to receive compliments, how it felt to be whistled at, perhaps, something that she hadn't happened to her in a long time, how it felt to enjoy a warm summer day at the beach with friends, and to hear the laughter of children and the waves and so on. All of this in her imagination now, but no less real. See, because Tantra sees things that we see. It's a doctrine, it's a way, rather, of life, which sees things that we see as real. So the more she visualized this, her desire that is, the stronger and clearer it became, such that she began to sense her power to believe. Now this is very important here, because in Tantra, we can transcend, and transcend is basically to change, using the everyday experience of life. We don't have to go to the divine. Tantra already sees the everything as divine. So in going with the flow of the everyday, we experience change, in other words, transcendence. She began to experience this power as a result of actions, you see. Tantra is very action-oriented. It's very much a how-to system, in a way. And she could feel the tug of this power the more and more she did her visualization exercises, you see. And she noticed the changes, little changes at first. For example, she began to feel that she expected more of herself and took those few moments to throw garbage out of her car that was there for ages, to tidy up the kitchen before going to bed at night. She even felt more excited about life and became more aware of the air she breathed. See, Margaret was changing as her thinking was changing. Do you see the connection here? The connection of the everyday actions resulting in transcendence. Little transcendence at a time. A realization came over her as she finally got it, that in order for her to have different results in her life, she must continue to change. She got some changes as a result of little actions. So more changes, therefore, she concluded, would be bigger actions, right? And she began to realize that, with great certainty, that results came from her actions, in other words. With this, a huge attitude shift had taken place within Margaret, so that even the proverbial team of horses could not stop her, and she took even more action. But not just any action at this point. It wasn't action based on hairy-fairy belief or faith or whatever. It was what she was seeing now, very tantric once again, and experiencing. Actions then became with great certainty in getting the job done, and with the purpose that with every step she took with her actions, she was achieving step by step what she wanted. For example, for years, she'd heard her mom say, eat your vegetables, eat your vegetables. She said, Mom, forget about it. But now she took that to heart. She saw the real value in it, and she began to do it more. She became more happy, and as a result, see once again results, no longer felt that boredom-driven urge to grab unhealthy and unnecessary snacks. And began to find herself eating these mostly real meals and drinking mostly water instead of soda pop. She found that taking the 2 flights of stairs to her office was not only faster, see once again results, but also she enjoyed it more. With these changes, Margaret began to discover even more little changes within her life, such as gone were those persistent nasal sniffles, once again results. And no longer did she find herself passing out on the couch at 6 o'clock, but rather found herself wide awake until 9 o'clock, enjoying her favorite book. But then, at a certain point, the biggest surprise in her life. One morning, Margaret went up and put a pair of pants on she hadn't worn in quite a while, one of those which used a belt on the top. And when she buttoned them up, just the button that is, they seemed a bit loose, she thought. But even greater surprise was when she latched up that belt to the notch, or the line that the belt used to be worn at. Way too loose. Next notch, Still 2 boosts. Third notch, just right. Wow, says Margaret. Amazing. Results, she thought. See, at this point, Margaret had moved for sure from just merely believing to knowing she could change, because now she had results. Once again, very tantric. It's an observation. It was real for Margaret, so she continued with the flow. And with this evidence, everything got a real big boost for Margaret. You see, her desire was increased. Her vision became even more clear. She had greatly increased her power to believe in the possibility. You see, because if we have a desire, like Margaret, we can see it clearly, and now we know with great certainty that it's possible. The next thing that happened for Margaret, and what happens with us, is actions become willful. Think about it. You know you have a strong desire for something. You can see it clearly. You can feel that it's completely possible. Boom, on you go. That's it. You take the actions, and you take the actions with purpose in getting results, and with certainty. And therefore, results are constructive. They're there. Now, for Margaret, with all these newfound discoveries, she began to notice opportunities around her. Because of this, she began to meet people who thought more like her, people like us, who want a better life, right? She began to learn more knowledge. Once again, opportunities came to her, and knowledge came to her, more clarification, all the while, of what, when, and how to eat, and how her body was meant to be treated. She began to learn who she really was, and she began to fall in love with life. Once again, results, subtle results, extra results, right? Margaret had made a wonderful transformation of herself. You see, through the everyday, the imminent, Margaret had transcended what was her to now transformation of herself. She achieved her flatter belly, yes, and is very grateful for it. But furthermore, she recognizes that life is really like a continuum, wherein when one chooses to advance, the greater prize is feelings of happiness, joy, love, accomplishment, and transcendence using every day, and much more. Life can go on as it has, says Margaret, or we can choose something better by joining this great miracle of advancement. And hey, transcending ourselves through our everyday in the process. This is Margaret's story, and I think it tells a lot about the nature of this idea called Tantra, which in a way is a bit opposed to some ways of looking at things, which is that there's the divine, and then there's us and everything else. But it brings it all together and says, you know what? Right here and now, in our individual experience, we can grow. We can transcend ourselves to the ways that we want to be, the experiences that we want to have, and improve the quality of our lives. So I hope this answers the question in very simple terms. What is Tantra? And what can it do for us in terms of improving the quality of our lives? Hopefully we can see through Margaret's story that it's great simplicity. It is being okay with what we are and who we are, and recognizing desires which can be constructive to us. I mean, there's lots of desires that we can have too, that we can somehow see could be destructive in a way perhaps. But it's going with the flow of those which feel constructive to us, and then moving with that because they're real, rather than repressing and denying them, which some other systems may do. Thank you for listening. You have yourself a great couple of weeks, and I'll talk talk to you then. Bye bye for now.